You've probably heard the same claim repeated enough times to stop questioning it. The Japanese are the most disciplined savers on earth, a culture that quietly builds wealth on modest salaries while the rest of the world spends everything it earns. It's a nice story. It's also, as of the most recent data, not true anymore. Japan's household savings rate has collapsed to just 0.40%, a fraction of a percent of income actually being set aside, while the United States, the supposed nation of overspenders, is currently saving at 450%. The culture didn't hold on to the habit left. What survived isn't a national trait. It's a specific mechanical system that one woman built more than a century ago, long before Japan had any reputation for saving anything. A system that has nothing to do with income level and everything to do with a small, repeatable ritual. It still works exactly as well on a $35,000 salary today as it did on whatever a Tokyo household earned in 1904, because it was never actually about how much money arrived. It was about what happened to it in the 24 hours after it did. This is the part almost nobody explains correctly when they package this idea into a listicle. The method and the culture are two separate things, and only one of them was ever actually responsible for the results. The other one, the culture, just happened to be standing next to it for a while. If you've ever assumed you need to earn more before you can start building something real, this is the story of a system built specifically to prove that assumption wrong. And it's about to get uncomfortably specific about the actual numbers involved. The system is called Kakeibo, and it was invented in 1904 by Hani Motoko, widely credited as Japan's first female journalist, who built it as a household ledger for women managing family finances at a time when financial literacy for women was itself a fairly radical idea. The word translates loosely to household finance ledger, and the entire original version of it was nothing more sophisticated than a physical notebook, a pen, and a fixed, repeated habit of writing every yen down by hand. That detail, by hand, is not incidental to why it worked. There's a specific friction built into physically writing down a purchase that doesn't exist when a bank app auto-categorizes it for you 3 days later, in a summary you skim for 4 seconds. The person doing Kakeibo in 1904 had to sit down, open the notebook, and manually account for every transaction, which meant every transaction got a half-second of conscious attention it would never have gotten otherwise. Modern budgeting apps optimize this friction away entirely in the name of convenience, and in doing so quietly removed the exact mechanism that made the original version effective. At the start of each month, the ritual asks 4 questions. How much money is coming in? How much needs to be saved? How much is actually being spent? And how could that spending improve? Notice what's missing from that list. There's no 5th question about income growth, no assumption that the real lever is earning more. The entire system was engineered around the money that's already arriving, on the theory that most households lose far more to unexamined leakage than they'd ever gain from a raise they don't currently have. For most of the 20th century, this stayed almost entirely a domestic Japanese practice, passed down as a household custom rather than marketed as a financial product. That changed in 2018 when author Fumiko Chiba published an English-language guide built around the method, introducing it to a Western audience that had never heard the word Kakeibo before and had no cultural inheritance of it whatsoever. What followed was a genuine test of the theory underneath all of this, that the mechanism works independent of the culture around it, and notebook by notebook, that appears to be exactly what happened. Once the money is being tracked, Kakeibo sorts every single expense into one of four categories, and the specific choice of categories is where the method quietly reveals its actual philosophy. The first is survival: rent, groceries, utilities, the costs that don't ask permission. The second is optional: the things chosen rather than required: dinners out, subscriptions, the daily coffee. The third category is the one almost no modern budgeting app includes at all: culture, meaning books, museums, a class, anything that counts as investment in yourself rather than mere consumption. The fourth is unexpected: repairs, gifts, the emergency that always eventually arrives. The reason the culture category exists at all is worth sitting with. A purely restrictive budgeting system, the kind most people picture when they hear the word budget, treats every non-essential expense as a failure to be minimized. Kakeibo does something different. It explicitly protects a category of spending that isn't survival and isn't impulse, on the theory that a system which asks you to starve every part of your life that isn't strictly necessary will eventually be abandoned because nobody sustains total deprivation for decades. The method was built to be kept, not just started. What this produces in practice is a household that can tell you not just how much it spent last month, but what kind of spending it was, which turns "I don't know where the money goes" from a permanent condition into a solvable, visible problem. Most people who fail to build wealth on a modest income aren't failing at earning. They're failing at a kind of accounting so basic that nobody ever taught it to them as a habit rather than a one-time exercise. The part of Kakeibo that separates it most clearly from a simple spreadsheet is the ending of the month, not the middle of it. At the close of each month, the ritual requires a written reflection, not just a total, but an actual sentence or two about what happened, what surprised you, and what you'd change. This is the step almost every modern financial app skips entirely because it can't be automated. A machine can categorize a transaction. It cannot make you sit with the discomfort of noticing you spent more on convenience food than on the rent-adjacent essential you'd been telling yourself you couldn't afford. There's a specific psychological mechanism at work here that behavioral economists have studied under different names for decades. The simple act of writing something down in your own handwriting creates a stronger memory trace and a stronger sense of ownership over the decision than glancing at a digital dashboard ever does. You don't just see that you overspent on dining out. You wrote the number yourself, in your own hand, at the end of a month you lived through, which makes the number considerably harder to rationalize away by the following Tuesday. Over months and years, this monthly reflection becomes something closer to a feedback loop than a scorecard. The goal was never a single perfect month. It was a slow, compounding correction, month over month, nudging spending gradually toward whatever the household actually valued, rather than whatever habit or advertising had quietly installed by default. This is the exact mechanism that turns a system from a diet into an actual identity. The difference between trying to save money for a while and simply becoming someone who tracks it. Underneath Kakeibo sits a cultural concept called Mottainai, which roughly translates to a feeling of regret over waste. Not waste in the abstract, but a specific discomfort at seeing anything, money included, discarded before its full value has been extracted. This is the piece of the system that acts as a quiet defense against a trap that catches households at every income level. Lifestyle inflation, where every raise gets absorbed instantly by a corresponding upgrade, and the gap between income and spending never actually widens, no matter how much the income itself grows. Mottainai works against that instinct specifically because it reframes an upgrade not as a reward you've earned, but as a small, specific waste of something that was already working fine. The 5-year-old coat that still keeps you warm, the car that still runs, the apartment that still has a working kitchen. None of this is about permanent deprivation. It's about a genuine cultural discomfort with discarding functional value purely for the sake of novelty, which turns out to be one of the single largest silent drains on any household's ability to actually accumulate anything. If this kind of system, one designed to work regardless of what you earn, is the sort of thing you want to see more of, a subscribe helps more people find their way to it. No pressure, but I genuinely appreciate it. What Mottainai ultimately protects is the gap itself, the space between what comes in and what goes out, which is the only part of a household's finances that can actually be invested, saved, or grown. Income can stagnate for reasons entirely outside your control. The gap, on the other hand, responds directly to decisions made at this exact level, which is precisely why a system built around defending it, rather than around chasing a bigger number at the top, has survived unchanged for over a century. Here's where the abstract discipline turns into an actual number, because the entire premise of this system rests on a specific verifiable claim that consistency matters more than income, given enough time. Take a modest, unremarkable habit, setting aside $200 a month, roughly 46 hours a week, an amount well within reach of a household earning far less than 6 figures, and invest it consistently into a low-cost, diversified index fund tracking the market's long-run historical average return of roughly 8% annually. Run that for 30 years, and the number that comes out the other end is close to $298,000, built from a total of just $72,000 actually contributed. The remaining $226,000 was generated entirely by time and compounding, not by the size of any individual paycheck. The part of this that surprises people most isn't the ending number. It's how front-loaded the advantage of starting early actually is. Someone who begins this exact habit at age 20 needs to set aside less than 1/6 of what someone starting at age 50 would need to reach the same eventual total. Not because the older saver is doing anything wrong, but because compounding is fundamentally a function of time, far more than it's a function of the amount deposited in any given month. The specific dollar figure matters far less than most people assume. The starting date matters enormously. None of this requires a 6-figure salary, a windfall, or a lucky break. It requires the exact mechanism Kakeibo was built around, a visible gap between income and spending, defended consistently month after month, for long enough that time does the majority of the actual work. The math doesn't care whether the $200 came from a $35,000 salary or a $135,000 one. It only cares that it showed up on schedule for 3 decades. Run the same 30-year calculation with a far more conservative assumption, 6% annually instead of 8%, a number closer to a plain bond and stock mix than an aggressive market bet. And the total still lands around $201,000 on the same $72,000 actually contributed. The exact return assumption changes the ending number. It doesn't change the underlying conclusion. A small, boring, consistently defended gap, held for decades, outperforms almost any attempt to solve this problem by simply earning more instead. You think back to the assumption you probably started with, the one this entire video opened by dismantling, that some cultures are simply better at this, that discipline around money is a trait some people are born into and others aren't. The actual data says the opposite. Japan's own household savings rate has fallen to 0.40%, a country now saving less, proportionally, than the one it's stereotyped against. Whatever cultural advantage people assume still exists over there has, by the numbers, quietly evaporated. What didn't evaporate was the method, a manual ledger, 4 honest categories, a monthly reflection written by hand, and a cultural discomfort with waste that turned into an actual defense against lifestyle inflation. None of those 4 things require a particular nationality, a particular salary, or a particular starting point. They require a notebook, or the modern equivalent of one, and the willingness to look directly at a number most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You think, too, about the $298,000 built from contributions that never exceeded $200 a month. Not because the person doing it was especially talented at making money, but because they were unusually consistent about defending the gap between what came in and what went out. For 3 uninterrupted decades. The salary was never the ceiling this entire system was built to push against. The system was built to protect the one thing every income level actually has in common. A gap, however small, that either gets defended or gets quietly absorbed by everything around it. If there's one thing this system proves, it's that the habit matters more than the paycheck. The gap you defend today is the only thing compounding 30 years from now actually has to work with. But there's a fair question waiting on the other side of that. Once this kind of quiet, consistent saving actually accumulates into real money sitting in real accounts, does anything change in how the financial system treats you? It does. And we've already mapped exactly where those lines sit. Watch our episode on how banks treat you at every level of wealth. It picks up almost exactly where this one leaves off. At the moment the balance you've spent decades quietly building starts to be noticed by the people managing it.